In the year 200 BC, the vast empire of Han China stood at a critical crossroads. The newly established dynasty, barely a decade old, believed itself powerful enough to challenge the formidable Xiongnu confederation that controlled the steppes beyond the Great Wall. But pride often precedes catastrophe, and this moment would test the resolve of an entire civilization. The Han Dynasty had recently emerged victorious from a period of civil unrest. Emperor Gaozu, the founder of this mighty dynasty, sought to consolidate power and expand territorial control. He believed that the time had come to rid the Middle Kingdom of the threat posed by the Xiongnu, a confederation of nomadic tribes united under the leadership of a single powerful ruler known as the Chanyu. To Gaozu, conquest seemed inevitable. To submit to the nomads was unthinkable. The Xiongnu were not merely raiders or brigands. They were a sophisticated military force, unified under Modu Chanyu, one of history's most remarkable military strategists. Modu had transformed the scattered tribal bands into a formidable empire capable of rivaling the great civilizations of the world. His cavalry were legendary, swift, disciplined, and devastating in their coordination. Where the Han relied on infantry and defensive fortifications, the Xiongnu possessed mobility and numbers that would have seemed overwhelming. Emperor Gaozu, confident in the superiority of Han civilization and resources, made a fateful decision. He would send a military expedition northward to subdue the Xiongnu once and for all. The plan was straightforward: march north, defeat the nomadic forces, and establish Chinese dominance over the steppes. It was a plan born of arrogance, and it would nearly cost the emperor his life. In the autumn of 200 BC, Gaozu led a substantial army northward toward the Baiding Mountains in what is now Shaanxi province. The emperor himself rode with his forces, accompanied by his generals and advisors. The landscape grew increasingly rugged as they ventured further from civilized territories. Scouts reported Xiongnu movements, but Gaozu pressed forward, unwilling to turn back. His army numbered in the tens of thousands, surely sufficient to overwhelm any resistance they might encounter. Modu Chanyu, however, was no ordinary opponent. He had anticipated the Han advance and devised a cunning strategy. Rather than meet the Chinese forces in open battle where their superior numbers might prove decisive, Modu employed a tactic that would echo through military history for centuries to come: the feigned retreat. His forces would appear weak, seemingly broken, and fleeing. The Han, witnessing what appeared to be victory, would pursue eagerly, only to find themselves drawn into a carefully prepared trap. As the Han army approached the Baiding region, they encountered Xiongnu forces. These initial skirmishes seemed to favor the Chinese. The Xiongnu warriors retreated before the advancing Han columns. Encouraged by this apparent success, Gaozu himself rode forward with a small detachment of elite cavalry to pursue what he believed was a disorganized enemy. The trap was about to close. The emperor and his personal guard suddenly found themselves surrounded. What had seemed like a chaotic retreat transformed in moments into a coordinated encirclement. The Xiongnu cavalry, concealed in the hills and valleys of the Baiding Mountains, emerged from every direction. Gaozu's small force was cut off from the main army. The emperor, accustomed to the comforts and safety of the imperial palace, now faced the terrifying reality of being trapped by an enemy far more skilled in warfare than he had imagined. The Han army, witnessing their emperor in peril, attempted desperately to break through the Xiongnu lines and rescue him. But Modu's forces held firm. For several hours, the battle raged with neither side yielding ground. The emperor found himself pinned down with his guard, unable to advance, unwilling to retreat. Death seemed a distinct possibility. The great emperor of the greatest civilization on Earth was for the first time facing the real prospect of defeat and capture. It was not through military victory that Gaozu escaped his predicament, but through negotiation and cunning. Gaozu's advisors realized that continuing the battle would only result in more casualties and possible imperial capture. They proposed a truce. Messages were sent to Modu Chanyu, and negotiations began. The emperor's life hung in the balance as diplomat replaced warrior. Modu Chanyu, for all his military brilliance, was also a pragmatist. Capturing or killing the Han emperor might bring momentary glory, but it would guarantee decades of wars of retribution. Instead, he negotiated terms that would bind the two powers together. Emperor Gaozu agreed to cease military aggression, to maintain peaceful relations with the Xiongnu, and to pay tribute in the form of silk, grain, and precious goods. Additionally, the Han agreed to strengthen their relationship through matrimonial alliances. Imperial princesses would be sent to marry Chanyu nobles, creating family bonds between the two dynasties. With these terms agreed, Gaozu was released from his perilous position. He and his army withdrew southward, returning to Han territories with their pride wounded, but their lives preserved. The campaign that was meant to establish Chinese dominance over the steppes had instead resulted in the opposite, an acknowledgement of Xiongnu power and the establishment of a relationship between equals rather than conqueror and conquered. The Battle of Baiding, or the Baiding Encirclement as it came to be known, sent shockwaves through the Chinese Empire. The great Emperor Gaozu had faced defeat at the hands of nomads he had considered inferior. Historians and military strategists throughout the empire debated the implications. Some called it a humiliation. Others recognized it as a necessary adjustment to geopolitical realities. The invincibility of Han civilization had been called into serious question. Yet from this apparent defeat emerged something remarkable. The peace agreement between Han and Xiongnu, known as the Hekin or harmonious marriage policy, brought nearly a century of relative peace to the frontier. Trade flourished along new routes. Cultural exchange increased. The two civilizations, having tested each other's resolve, learned to coexist rather than continually contest for dominance. The Baiding incident also profoundly influenced military tactics throughout history. Modu Chanyu's stratagem of feigned retreat became a textbook example of military deception. Centuries later, this same tactic would be employed by warriors across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Military theorists would study how a smaller or apparently weaker force could manipulate the enemy's expectations and psychology to achieve victory. For Emperor Gaozu, the experience tempered his ambitions. In his remaining years, he ruled more cautiously, respecting the power of the Xiongnu and maintaining the peace accord. His successors, learning from his costly lesson, continued the Hekin policy. What had begun as a military catastrophe transformed into a diplomatic triumph that would shape international relations in East Asia for generations. The legacy of Baiding extends far beyond ancient history. It serves as a powerful reminder that military superiority alone does not guarantee success. Arrogance, miscalculation, and underestimating one's opponent can prove fatal even to the mightiest empires. Conversely, the battle demonstrated that pragmatism and willingness to negotiate, even after military setbacks, can transform potential catastrophe into lasting peace. Today, more than 2,000 years later, the Battle of Baiding remains a pivotal moment in East Asian history. It marked the point where the Han Dynasty, one of history's greatest empires, acknowledged the legitimacy and power of the peoples beyond its borders. It established a precedent for diplomacy between great powers and showed that honor could be preserved through wisdom, not merely through military conquest. In the misty mountains of Baiding, where Emperor Gaozu faced his greatest peril, the course of civilization was subtly but permanently altered.